Hello, everyone. I'm Rania Khalek, and this is a special live episode of Dispatches. After a year of Israel's unrelenting genocide in Gaza, which has now spread into Lebanon, the resistance to it is fiercer than at any point in the history of resistance to Israeli colonialism. Despite operating under the most dire of circumstances, from out of a besieged death camp, Hamas continues to fight and exact casualties. And despite its entire senior military leadership being assassinated, Hezbollah is firing over 100 missiles at the Israelis daily and is staving off a ground invasion as we speak. Still, the losses are huge, unprecedented even, with scenes out of northern Gaza reminiscent of Auschwitz and more Lebanese destruction and displacement than ever before. The grim reality is that Israeli cruelty is only going to get more sadistic, more depraved, and more genocidal. Israeli society is consumed by exterminationist hate. As long as the US led rules based order allows the impunity to continue, the horrors will get worse. There's no scenario where the Israelis stop on their own. They'll keep expanding, keep torturing, keep raping, and keep escalating until they're stopped by outside intervention, which means either the US cutting off the weapons flow or the power of Israel's adversaries regaining their deterrence through force. To discuss the latest developments, I'm joined by Lebanese journalist Ghadi Francis. Ghadi, welcome
Hello,
back to the
Rania.
show. Hello,
Thank you
hello.
for having me. We missed you in Beirut.
Well, thank you for joining me from Beirut, and we've missed you here at Breakthrough News. The last time I had you on was about a month ago, and it was just after the pager attacks. And before we get into some of the more specifics about what's taking place today, I'm just curious if you could give us a bit of an overview of how Lebanon has changed in the last month. I mean, for the country, for you, there's been a dramatic escalation of basically all out Israeli war on the Lebanese people.
First of all, Rania, you are a daughter of this land, and you understand that we have been weaved and made in a way to, we're proud. We are proud people, even as we have around 1 million, which is like a quarter of the Lebanese society, forcibly displaced under the attacks and the bombings of their homes and the annihilation and the destruction that is carried on with impunity by the Israeli occupation forces. Even as we go all this, you can see people are still proud and they're telling you that we are ready to face this. We have the stamina to wait, and we trust, and we are confident in the long-term victory. You see, the Lebanese people, especially these people that are displaced today, have been face to face with this kind of atrocities for decades. It's just the frequency or the amount of the attack is unprecedented for sure. The assassinations were very big, of course. But as the military operation goes on, you see the people's spirits are still being lifted by the actual ground facts that are happening in the south, by by the rockets, by the drones, by the capacity of the Lebanese resistance that is emerging day after day. So, yes, Lebanon is undergoing an unprecedented attack. Beirut is being bombed. The southern suburb is being destroyed. It hasn't been. People tell you that in 2006 it was the same. It is even more this time. But it all is about the mindset. You see, for me personally, Rania, we've been living in this one way or the other, whether it's Tufan al-Aqsa, whether it's after 7 October, or if it's 20 years ago or 10 years ago. The project of Zionism in Palestine has always been expansionist. They've always been this racist. They've always planned to do this. And they have precedents of trying to do this. I think now Netanyahu is on a killing spree, and since he has the chance to, and the US backing to, he's trying to destroy Hezbollah, to maintain something at his northern borders. Whatever he's trying to do, he's shooting himself in the foot. And this is what Israeli media is saying. And now we can discuss throughout this live how and why Israel is on an escalating, and it's just catalyzing its self-destruction by all these atrocities that are happening, whether it's in Gaza, northern Gaza, Jabalia, southern Lebanon, Syria, Yemen. I mean, who didn't they bomb yet?
That's a good question. Who haven't they bombed yet? And okay, so let's move to the issue of the resistance right now, because in the U.S. media and in the Western media more generally, as I'm sure you know, since Hassan Nasrallah's killing a month ago now, almost. And all of the elimination of the Hezbollah senior leadership and the various blows that Hamas has taken over the last year, you would think the Israelis are winning, right? Because they're exacting so much destruction around them. Like, yes, they're bombing hospitals, they're killing paramedics, they're blowing up entire villages. So Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran even are being portrayed as very weak. So let's talk about Hezbollah, because everyone thought a month ago, here at least, that Hezbollah's over, including Hezbollah's enemies inside Lebanon, by the way. But what we've seen over the last week, and I'm just going to point out a few things. A week ago, now it seems like it was a month ago, Hezbollah managed to hit an Israeli military base and kill several Israeli soldiers, and there was a lot, dozens of casualties near Tel Aviv just a week ago with a drone. Over the weekend, they managed to send in a drone that hit Netanyahu's residence in Haifa. And they've been, sending ballistic missiles over to Israel from Lebanon. And they've also been on the ground in South Lebanon, pushing back an Israeli invasion. And that's just a few of the things that we've witnessed since everyone's saying Hezbollah is about to collapse, Hezbollah is about to collapse. So you're in Beirut right now. From where you're sitting, Ghadi, how is Hezbollah performing since the assassination of its entire military leadership? Do you see this as a weak group that's on the precipice of collapse, or is there something else going on here?
I think what the Israelis have done to this organization is just a forced revival, and some might argue that it was a much needed one. Because when you are a military group and you are used to fighting and then you rest for a decade, corruption, politics, rest happens to the organization. And then there are two kinds of people in Hezbollah. There are the people who are on the ground fighting, and the people in the society benefiting from this strength. The tremendous shakeup that happened because of all that is being carried on by the Israelis, whether it's assassinations or bombings or the pager attack or the destruction of all the infrastructure of the southern suburb of Beirut, because it's not about arms or Hezbollah people here. It's about, like, for example, yesterday they just hit buildings that are empty just to say that this society is supposed to be destroyed. So what these atrocities are reviving in the ideology, in the organization, it's the sense of existential war. The difference here, and I'd really like to discuss that with you, the Israelis are carrying out an existential war because they know that they cannot go on like that. They think by killing us all, they might gain some time. Us in Lebanon, we did not really, like Hezbollah or the Lebanese resistance, did not really start as the end game kind of war. It started as solidarity with Gaza to help to ease in that attack on helpless children and women in Gaza. But today, after the Israelis made it like personal with Lebanon, they just made all the fighters angrier. They made it personal, and they killed their modern day Hussein figure. So basically, you just reminded them of their existential fight. And after killing their Hussein figure and all their Hussein's friends figures, all the leadership, all their father figures in the organization, after you do that, you go after their civilians and you start making them feel dehumanized inside your media, in attacking their homes and their land with white phosphorus. So what you're doing is that whether some people were a little bit like skeptical or hesitating about this confrontation, everybody's now all in. I could see some activists, some journalists, even some of the Christian rightists from some of the southern villages. In the beginning of this war, they were saying, it's not about us, it's about Hezbollah. We don't want that fight. But then after the Israelis hit churches in southern Lebanon and they killed their friends in a Christian village after hitting the medical teams, the rescue teams. Well, this same person who's known for his political stances started writing anti-Israel. So what Israel is doing in the Lebanese society, it is reminding the new generation of activists, of politicians, of emerging journalists and people with voices, whether they're comedians or artists. They are rebranding us just like the people we read and learned about that were in Beirut in the 80s and that were writing and working and active anti-Israel. I think for me, in the long run, yes, it is very hard today. I'm not going to kid here and tell you it's so nice that I hear bombing every day in my life and that I know all my people, most of my friends have been displaced. I have been displaced more than once in the past 3 weeks for different reasons, whether it's danger or alarms or alerts or the sound. Okay, so we're not comfortable in that war. It's not easy to be in that war. But because it's a 77-year-old war, when you look at the differences, you cannot disregard the idea that we are doing way better. Our stamina is big. We can take our threshold of going on and resisting and existing in war is way bigger. We can take more pain, okay? And now, and after 77 years, we don't only have drones, we have intelligence capacities that could tell us about their secret bases in Benyamina and southern Haifa. They were having dinner. Golani, the best kinds of soldiers in the Israeli, $17 billion have been paid from the US taxpayer money during this year for these idiots to kill children. After $17 billion and all that weapons and ammunitions and impunity, a bunch of underground organization men from Lebanon, from southern Lebanon, these people you dehumanize, were able to crack your intelligence to find out where the Golanis are having dinner and to send them a drone to that table while they were having dinner, regardless of the idea that we don't know and the Israelis don't tell us about their casualties and their losses. The idea of safety for Israel is defining. It's not like Lebanon. For us, I hear the bombing, the house shakes, I don't move. It's not great, but we've been through that. For us, it's not about being safe, it's our land. But on the other side of that war, there is a fake society made up and built up by people imported from all around the world, sold the idea that this is your promised, safe, cute land where you can squat and be protected by the world to be here in other people's land. When they are spending that time in the shelters, they're gonna change their mind. And this is the exact idea of what Israel is. Israel is a settler society. When settlers are packing their bags and leaving, they are undoing the idea of Israel. But for us, when we leave our southern villages, we've done that 3 times in our history, and we've rebuilt them 3 times. We've seen that happen, and we are ready. And the people tell you we are ready to do it once again because we've paid a big price. We've lost our loved ones. We have paid a lot of pain and blood and tears to back out of this fight right now when we're that close, when we've seen our children, our men build drones and build planes monitored and capable of cracking this $1 billion air force and air protection system for Israel and get to Benjamin Netanyahu's home to make out a historical point where this is the first time in the history of the Zionist entity where a resistance group, an organization actually attempts to assassinate the Prime Minister of Israel. This is also another defining moment because they think they are better humans and they have been chosen to kill us. So when you tell them that us as dehumanized creatures, as like brown less humans are capable of taking the head of your system out with our drones made with sweat and blood and tears, you are telling them that the whole project is off, that the whole plan is not going to work, that the whole Israel is just going to crumble. I know we are paying a lot of blood. I know that this is not something fun to go through. But what I also know is that the road to liberation has always been like that. There is no easy way to liberation from an expansionist, ethno-supremacist, war criminal, Zionist entity that has been planned, a colonial apartheid state. It's not going to be easy to dismantle it, but I tell you, all the tools have been broken. They have nothing to rebuild. Their economy is crumbling, their security is crumbling, their trust is crumbling. Their army doesn't want to go to the fight. They just want to use planes and bomb children. Can you see their internal conflict about coming to the northern borders? They don't want to fight our men because they don't have a cause here.
Mhm.
What's their cause in taking our villages? They don't want to come and die. They just want to kill us. But for us, we are willing. I tell you, I am willing. I'm a woman. I'm a journalist. I'm not a fighter. I'm willing to die before I give my home to any Polish settler.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. I think most people in the world would agree with that. And really quickly, before I move on to the next topic here, I just want to remind people to like, subscribe, and share. Make sure you smash the like button. It helps boost us in the algorithm. Ghadi, I want to ask you a bit more about the support for Hezbollah, because you're talking about how this is reinforced for people in Lebanon, that this is an existential fight. It's not just a support fight for Gaza. This is an Israeli war on all of Lebanon. Here in the US, Hezbollah, and you know this, is portrayed as this Iranian proxy that only Lebanese Shia support. But you are, and you're very vocal about this, you come from a Lebanese Christian family. Now, I'm not going to sit here and suggest that Ghadi's views represent all of the Lebanese Christian sentiment, but you do represent a certain viewpoint from outside the Shia community in Lebanon. So I want to go back to that issue of, the way Hezbollah is portrayed as it's this horrible Islamist organization that has Lebanon, it's holding Lebanon hostage. It's a threat to any non-Shia in Lebanon, and even it's a threat to Shias too. It forces them to support them. So now that Lebanon is being carpet bombed in many areas, the Israelis are trying to invade. What is Hezbollah to someone like you in Lebanon in terms of their protective ability in the country?
Well, first of all, I want to answer to that idea whether I represent all the Christians or most of the Christians in Lebanon. Let's talk about the Christians in the Levant. I think I represent 90% of the Christians in Palestine and 90% of the Christians in Syria and around 90% of the Christians that are still in Iraq, not the Iraqi Christians that fled Iraq. So the Levantine Christianity, from the Bishop Atallah Hanna, who's the Bishop of Jerusalem, to Munzir Ishaq, who's the Reverend of Beit Lahem, and to countless reverends and priests in Lebanon and Syria who have vocally supported the rights, the Palestinian rights, and the struggle to liberate Palestine. Inside Lebanon, there is an entity of Zionism Christianity that was planted even before building Lebanon. And that said that the Christianity would be aligned with the Judaism in the area, and they would be allies here as a front to the Islamic region. That was the plan in the 30s. But everything changed with the first invasion when Israel attempted, and it was aligned with the rightists, the Christian rightists in Lebanon. Even back then, they resulted in killing and displacing Christians. And there was Christian civil war induced by the Israelis as well. So in general, this whole idea that the Christianity in Lebanon is aligned with Israel is a bluff. It is made by the mainstream media, and it is only branded and advertised by militias that have always been armed and planted by Zionism since day one in Lebanon. So yes, I do not represent every Christian in Lebanon, but nobody represents every Christian anywhere. And the Levantine Christianity that is rooted in Palestine has to be with resistance and is always within the framework of calling for liberating Palestine without even like without saying pro Hamas or pro Hezbollah, but is always with the people. So let me go now to Hezbollah. Hezbollah inside Lebanon is the largest political party. Its political sector is not under sanction. It is not listed as terrorism by the EU. So you have members of the parliament that are elected, and to just FYI, they have the most votes in the Lebanese parliament. The highest numbers of votes are always gained by Mohammed Rad, the head of the Hezbollah bloc in the parliament. So it's not about liking them or disliking them. If you call a dog a cat, it doesn't become a cat. So if you just so the Americans have that idea of like saying facts out there and like repeating them as mantras to their pets in their foreign policy in the region. And then they're always like singing this song and like make believe. And this is why they lose in the end. They always lose. The project never works. Condoleezza Rice wanted to make up a new Middle East in 2006. She didn't. She failed because she thought she's empowered enough because she repeated a song for herself then. And now they repeat a song to themselves like Hezbollah, only the Shia, we can like distance them from the society. We can just finish them all. We kill their leaders and that's that. Well, even if you kill all the Shias, there will be a new kind of society that will be armed and that will fight you. Because even before the Shia were Hezbollah, there were people in the south that were fighting you. It's about land and rights right now. But if you want to say that it's about the Shia or Hezbollah, the more you oppress them, the more you revive their vengeance and their ideology. And the reason why they are the only group from all the resistance groups that have been emerging in the Lebanese history. The only reason why Hezbollah is the only group that came to you, Netanyahu, is because they have this ideology. This is why they're shooting themselves in the foot. They are reminding every Shia person, not only in Lebanon, in the world, by killing Sayyid Nasrallah, that they have vengeance with them. They just turned 100 million Shia in the Middle East to very angry and very like passionate fighters by assassinating Sayyid Nasrallah. Even people who like we were discussing today, me and a friend who lives in London and who's always very like he's like 100% sure that we're going to win. So every time I'm feeling a little bit skeptical, I call him. So he was like, you know something, if I had 80% feeling that we're gonna win, after they killed Sayyid Nasrallah, it's 100. And I really feel the same. Because the failure, they needed to go that far to deliver any kind of win, but still not one hostage has been returned. Not one settler came back to northern areas. No, on the contrary, Haifa is displaced now and Tel Aviv tomorrow. And the structure, the military structure of Hezbollah is just thriving and the momentum is growing while the Israelis deliver no wins. So I don't think in the end, to go back to your question, Hezbollah is not going to crumble. The Lebanese society cannot change its confrontation with the expansionist Zionist entity. To be Christian, you have to be aligned with the only way to remain in your land. Nobody defended the Christianity in Palestine. Nobody defended Christianity in Syria. It is only the armed resistance that was able to maintain the churches in Ma'lula, in Homs, in around Damascus, in Hama, in Mhardi, this is during the past decade. So as a Christian in the Middle East, from Nineveh against Daesh, where Qasim Soleimani aided the Iraqi Christians, to Ma'lula against Daesh, where Hezbollah aided the Syrian Christians, to Al-Qa in Lebanon, where Hezbollah and the Lebanese army defended the Christians. There is no place in the Middle East where being a Christian wasn't preserved by these groups in the last 10 years. So it is only natural to be there. And also because they are in the politics in Lebanon, they have to understand in Lebanon, whatever your media is telling you, the Hezbollah is a political party. It's an idea. You have kids and you have grown-ups and you have children and you have women and you have seculars and you have religious people that are aligned with their political idea and their political governance in Lebanon. And they are a part of the parliament and they sit down with presidents and they negotiate over national stuff because they are a part of the government. We have ministers that are in their cabinets because of Hezbollah's choice. So Hezbollah is a part of the ruling society and of the society in general. And regardless of the designation that the US uses, it cannot change the fact that 1 million Lebanese or more chose to be represented by Hezbollah. This is your democracy, no? They voted like that.
Well, speaking of democracy, you currently have the Americans, as the Israelis tried to pressure Hezbollah militarily, and you have Netanyahu telling the Lebanese to basically either kill each other or face a Gaza-like situation when he says to rise up and get rid of Hezbollah. And of course, the Israelis are specifically bombing Lebanese Shias to try to peel them off of Hezbollah, to try to, and you're saying obviously this is going to do the opposite. In fact, it's going to make people cling more to those who are protecting them.
If it's right to say so, we'd really thank him for saying that. He's just making people want to like Hezbollah even more. In what logic does a person who kills your children guides you on what to do in politics and you'd listen? I mean, I think Hezbollah would thank him. The more you are speaking against them, the more people want them.
Yeah.
You're bombing us from the skies, man.
But they also, so the Americans at the same time, of course, are speaking of the issue of democracy. They are trying to interfere in the Lebanese political system. They're obsessed for some reason with appointing a president that they like. I don't know if they think that maybe if they get like Joseph Aoun, who they seem to really like, who's head of the Lebanese army, if they get him to be appointed president, somehow Hezbollah just like evaporates. I'm not really sure what the end game is there, but I know there was a man visiting Lebanon today. He's the Biden appointed special envoy who happens to also be, I don't know if he still has Israeli citizenship, but he served in the Israeli army, Amos Hochstein. He came to Lebanon today. He's repeatedly come to Lebanon before October 7th, but a lot after October 7th to act as like an interlocutor between the Israelis and Lebanese officials who don't actually speak because they're technically at war. And he's been pushing this idea of appointing a president. I just very quickly want to play a clip of him in a recent interview because I want to play it as much as possible because some Lebanese seem to think that he's there to promote peace or that he's their friend. But here's Amos Hochstein real quick talking about what he thinks the Lebanese should do based on what he wants.
And at the same time, have a new government. Once Lebanon selects a president, have a new government that could address the critical needs of the country.
Once we select a new president, Ghadi.
Yeah.
But all that's to say, okay, so that's Amos Hochstein, just so you know what he looks like. He was in Lebanon today. I'm not sure if he's still there, but he met with all the typical players. I believe he met with Nabi Berri. He met with Joseph Aoun. And he's basically, giving them the Israeli line. The Americans, as much as there's those Lebanese in Lebanon who constantly complain about Iranian interference because apparently Iran giving weapons to Lebanese to defend their land is controversial and interference, those same people will never complain about the fact that the Americans are trying to reshape the Lebanese political scene. And I'm just curious if you can explain to our viewers, because Lebanon can feel quite complicated, what is the U.S. doing here? And will it actually work?
The US is doing in politics the parallel force and effort to what the Israelis are doing in military. Amos Hochstein is trying to invest on the bombings that were happening last night above our heads in Beirut. They're trying to see whether we are weak as Lebanese and we're willing to give up But poor Amos, he has to go back to 2006 and read about the veteran Dick Cheney and his failures with the Lebanese negotiators. When you have a drone that is arriving in Netanyahu's home in the morning, skipping all your air defenses, you don't get the right to tell us what to do. You listen to us, or we send another drone. This is the Lebanese attitude. This is what we are used to. And we do remember many of the scenes that were later reported between Nabih Berri and Condoleezza Rice and the multiple rounds of so-called negotiations. To me, what Amos Hochstein, the ex-Israeli soldier, did today in Lebanon is his first round of many rounds of negotiations. The negotiations are being drawn today in the fire, in Aita al-Shab, and the 4 ballistic missiles and the over 70 missiles that hit different areas, and the 40 missiles that hit Golan Heights today, and in Tel Aviv, a ballistic missile, and in Port of Haifa, another one. And the acceleration and the ascending order and the ascending manner of the rockets that are arriving from Lebanon to the occupied Palestinian territories, these are all empowering points to the Lebanese negotiator. And Nabih Berri is way too veteran, actually. He's actually over veteran in that sense. He's lived all the wars. And he has the stamina to go on, and he understands the American brain. So what's happening now is that the negotiations are being built on the ground in the Lebanese ability to maintain the ground. And we have just begun, Rania. You know, the reports, the military reports say that Rudwan forces are still not in the fight. So what is happening now, the deterrence that is happening in southern Lebanon now is happening in the guerrilla fighting by the front line that is not even the very skilled Rudwan fighters. So the military capacities of a Hezbollah fighter is beyond the expectations as a human and as weaponry. So I don't think it's very easy for Mr. Amos to come just few hours after bombing the empty buildings of Qard al-Hassan and build a win on that. He's got to wait a little bit, maybe until we stop, until maybe Lebanon has no more rockets to hit or something. Maybe by then we will let you take our airspace. They're coming and asking for our airspace as if they have already finished the war. Well, come. You are not being able to come on the ground. You just want to take the air as a gift, like that, and it's the beginning of the war. So I think listen, Rania, there was a point where people really thought about negotiations. Me, personally, I never believed negotiations. I mean, look at Gaza. 1 year of rounds of talks and negotiations by the Qataris and the Egyptians, and the Egyptians and the Qataris, and the Americans and the French. And what happened in Gaza? Did they stop them? Did they stop the Israelis from executing all the men today? Did they stop them from burning tents, from killing children and women and doctors? Did they stop them from using white phosphorus on people? Did they stop them from doing anything? Did they stop them from raping prisoners? Did they stop them from skinning and stealing organs from the bodies after slaughtering them? Negotiations, what are you talking about after 45,000 martyrs in Gaza? Negotiations, what are you talking about? Who buys that negotiations from the Americans? Well, the Americans told the Iranians and the French, they all had a deal on the day where stupid Netanyahu chose to assassinate Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah from New York. So the Americans can't even control that tantrum killing spree kind of man. They either can't control him, or they fake that they can't control him because he's actually doing what they want him to do. But both ways tells me one thing. I don't buy their negotiators or their negotiations. We have practiced a lot of fake and bluffing kind of talks from the West in this 77 years of struggle. And there's like one of the very few good things that I know and repeat from Arafat is that it's only power that brings you back land. Okay, so negotiations cannot bring you back land.
That's true. That's true. And I appreciate what you mentioned about the airspace, because one of the things that the Israelis are demanding is that in any ceasefire, I put ceasefire in big quotes because they don't want one yet, is that they can basically do whatever they want in Lebanese airspace whenever they want, which is something that nobody would accept. Certainly not even, no country in their right mind would accept that unless they have to completely submit. And we're not there yet. But I want to ask you about the internal enemies in Lebanon, because, I'm talking to you from the Washington, D.C. area, and there's an organization here called the American Task Force for Lebanon, which is very closely aligned with the Lebanese Forces Party. It's Lebanese, like very wealthy Lebanese in this country, who are very close to both the Democratic and Republican parties. They're constantly claiming to speak on behalf of Lebanese Americans. And they're so thrilled that Nasrallah was killed. They're kind of calling for a ceasefire, but they're also trying to work with the Americans to use this as an opportunity to get rid of their political enemies in Lebanon, meaning Hezbollah and their allies. And obviously, they have allies on the ground there. Their allies on the ground there are the Lebanese forces, are these like fascist parties that have historically been murderous militias in Lebanon. They hate Palestinians. They really hate anybody who's not like them. So they also hate lots of Lebanese. And they see this war in Lebanon as just a war on the South. They don't care about the South. You know this. I'm just kind of saying this for our viewers. This sort of Lebanese treacherous mentality, and I think it's marginal, but they do have some power here in the US. They don't see all of Lebanon as all of Lebanon. They think Israel's fighting a war just on the South, a war they're very happy to see Israel fight. They would love to see a civil war fomented. They support outlets like MTV, which is a right-wing Lebanese outlet that's funded by a billionaire that's constantly trying to stoke sectarian hatred and is completely in line with what the Americans and the Israelis want. So I'm just curious, I'm seeing this from here in the US. How relevant is that attitude? How dangerous is that attitude? How real is that attitude in Lebanon? Because I do worry, and I think a lot of people worry, that this sort of person that I'm talking about is going to be able to, at some point, if this continues for months and months on end, is going to be able to stoke some sort of civil unrest that will help the Israelis.
Well, they were all there in the beginning. In 1948, they were there. The same vibe, the same kind of policy, the same kind of good lapdog for the Westerner and the colonial power. There's always been that. The only good part is that we've seen them in the 80s. They were way more powerful, and they didn't succeed. Yes, there is a threat to the civil arrest. Yes, because this is one of the papers they would play. And this is where I would say we have to trust the Lebanese army to be able to keep the ground clean. And we have to trust that there's somewhere, someone in that alliance that would tell them that any kind of civil unrest would turn out even to their, not to their good. Because you don't want to fight inside Lebanon, because I mean, the 80s are there. I don't want to remind anyone of them because they were very dark times. But in the 80s, the Marines were slaughtered in Lebanon. In the 80s, assassinations took place. In the 80s, Bashir Gemayel, that was coming with the Israelis, was killed in his meeting. The Lebanese society, the Lebanese community, the Lebanese fighters of all sects, of all kind of ideologies, all of them took arms, and all of them wanted to fight this existential fight. The more you oppress people, and the more you occupy, and the more you tell them that you want to kill them, the more they have nothing to lose, and they will fight you with all that they have. And regardless of what your lapdogs tell you, the society in Lebanon the most of the society in Lebanon, most of the Lebanese people, just like most of the Palestinians and most of the Syrians and most of the Iraqis, do not like the Polish Melkowski or whatever his name is that goes by the name Netanyahu to take their land. They're not going to like that. We're all going to fight that. Regardless if you want to acknowledge it, if you want to name it a war with Hezbollah or a war with Shia or a war yesterday with Fatah or the day before you wanted to take refuge in our land, regardless of the banner that you're holding. This land is ours. And what couldn't be achieved when you were way more powerful and numerous cannot be achieved today when the barefoot underground societies, underdog of the world from Yemen.
Oh no, I lost Ghadi. Well, she'll probably be back. She was on a roll. She's back already. Hang on. There we go. You were on a roll. It was what I don't know what happened, but just keep going, girl. Keep going.
I was saying what you couldn't achieve in the 80s, you cannot achieve today when the underdog from Yemen to Syria to Iraq to Lebanon to Gaza knows how to make handmade rockets and to fight back with ballistic missiles. It's not going to happen. So I think the only good result that would come out of this is when the Americans wake up and choose to bet on the actual native horse in the Middle East. If they want to build a hegemony and take our goods and take our land and take our transit and take our great location as Mesopotamia and Levantine, and this is what they want from here. I think after trying their hegemony for all these years, they must try to build friendships with the natives, and they must acknowledge that this is our land and we're not going to give up.
Yeah. I mean, no one ever has. No one ever has. I want to ask you, Ghadi, about something that we hear a lot here in the US too. And that is the common talking point is that, well, a couple things. It's that Iran is obviously a malicious actor. It's like controlling everything, puppeteering everything in Lebanon. And that's really the problem is in Lebanon is the Iranians, not anybody else. And that if only Lebanon and even the Palestinians would just normalize with Israel, you know, we could be like Egypt and Jordan. You don't see the Israelis carpet bombing Egypt and Jordan. You know, we could even be, Ghadi, we could be like Dubai. Look how beautiful Dubai is. So why fight? What's this fight even over? Just put down your arms, stop firing missiles at the Israelis, stop being on Iran's side because Iran's so big, bad, and evil, and just accept being a country that can be like Jordan and Egypt. Why don't you want to be like Jordan and Egypt? Explain that to me. I'm just curious, as somebody in Lebanon, how do you respond to that very common?
First of all, I would prefer to die. I would prefer to die than to be stuck in a system, an autocracy like the one in Jordan or Egypt. I prefer death than to be ruled in Egypt and being a part of the siege on Gaza people. I mean, what shame. I'd rather die here in the war than be in that kind of honorless peace. Do you know that the Egyptians and the Jordanians have no say to the Israelis? You know that the Israelis choose everything. There's no presence or say or decision to any of these nations. But if you want to speak about Dubai and the Emirates, like they're different. They don't have any borders with the Israelis. They don't have any problem with the Israelis. They don't have any history. I mean, it's a 50-year-old country that is built and made to be an economic platform, to be aided. It's an ally of America and Britain. Why would the Emirati want to fight the Israelis? You know, it's not maybe it's not his baggage. And when they say Iran's fight, I just want to acknowledge here that there is a great deal of Iranian voters that have a problem with their government because they see that a lot of their tax money goes to helping these groups that are fighting Israel. So some Iranians say it's not our job to pay for Lebanese and Palestinians and Yemenis and Iraqis and to help all these groups and ideologies that are anti-Israel. So Iran is taking and carving out money and help and arms for these groups, but it's not about Iran either. This is our land and it is our fight. What's happening is that Iran has an alliance with the people that are fighting Israel, with the Lebanese people, with the Syrian people, with the Iraqi people, with the Yemeni people, and this alliance it's good if they're thinking strategically and they're thinking about their future and they know that in the end these are the groups that can form a certain alliance. This is allowed in politics. Why don't we always say the American-backed Israeli defense forces?
Mhm.
Why don't we call them American proxies as they rape people in prisons? Why is that designation only working when someone is Iran's ally or Russia's ally? Why are you allowed to give planes, F-35s, and bunker buster bombs and CPU rockets that have lethal gases all across the civilian streets in my city? Why don't we call these American-funded genocide and American-funded war crimes? So is it something to be ashamed of that Iran is helping these people in the Middle East to fight for their life and for their liberation? How come you go and you fund the Ukrainians to commit suicide on their front with Russia? What do you call that? Isn't that interference in Europe and in Russia? Or how about Taiwan and China? Or how about you meddling in the Venezuelan elections? Or the Sudanese problems? Or Congo?
Mhm.
I mean, if anyone has the right to speak about anyone, it is not the United States hegemony of America. Leave it to someone else, like, I don't know, Norway. But you, Americans?
I want to ask you to correct the record on something because we don't have to go too deep into this, but I see the typical characters, especially I always find it so fascinating when Israelis suddenly get and Americans too suddenly get very passionate about Arabs being killed. And one thing they'll say is that Hezbollah killed Syrians. How we should hate Hezbollah because look what Hezbollah did. You kind of referenced that earlier, but I'm just curious if you can speak to um Syria was subjected to a horrific proxy
First
war.
of all, let's start with these people. Do they know the Syrians? Do they know the Syrian people, or do they have a small plate of 3 Syrians that they like and they are aligned with, and they take everything about Syria from them? Because if you know Syria, you know that the 23 million Syrians are not reflected by the 2 million that have been displaced in Europe and the United States, and that are like there are some opposition figures, and many of them are sectarians, and a lot of them are really like anti-Assad agendas. So I don't think we can say that you're not biased here. When you're talking about the Syrian people are 23 million. Many of these millions you don't want to hear, so you put sanctions on. You don't allow them to Meta, you don't allow them to internet, you don't allow them with the Caesars to anything. You don't allow them to be considered humans with a voice or a vote, and you choose what kind of Syria you want to talk about. So regardless of the idea that these people hate Syria and the Syrian people and have all sorts of racism against them, so they have zero credibility to speak on their behalf or as if they really care about their lives. Because right now, when Syrian kids are being killed by Israeli bombs, they do not talk. It is happening today. They do not talk. So are these Syrian kids different from these Syrian kids? Yes, they are, because they care about Syrian kids only when it's aligned with their foreign policy. Going back to Hezbollah. Hezbollah started, it's historically, we're talking facts. They entered into Syria after 2013. After The whole Syrian opposition was out of the playground, and the beheading started. When the radical Arab proxies, Saudi proxies, Qatar proxies, Turkey proxies were slaughtering the Syrian kids and people. So these proxies, the Jabhat al-Nusra and the ISIS and the Free Syrian Army and Jund al-Haramain and Liwa al-Tawheed and Kata'ib Sham, these are not Syrian people. These are terrorists, which the US would designate as terrorists elsewhere and would pay money to kill elsewhere. They are Al-Qaeda-like groups that beheaded people just because they're Christians or Alawites or Shia, that bombed Palmyra, that bombed cultural heritage in Syria. After all this emerged in Syria, and after all this was just at the Lebanese borders, the moment that Hezbollah entered was for two reasons. The first one was when As-Sayyida Zainab's shrine inside Damascus was being bombed. It is a very important Shia heritage for them, and it was being bombed, and the Syrian army was not protecting it enough. The first presence was volunteership to protect their Sayyida Zainab bint Imam Ali. She's the daughter of Imam Ali, and this is her shrine. They went to defend it as volunteership in the beginning. And when the Syrian-Lebanese borders started to have ISIS groups that actually kidnapped Lebanese army and kidnapped Lebanese security forces and started publishing videos of beheading them. And then there was this whole fight in Lebanon where Hezbollah and the Lebanese army protected the borders. So what Hezbollah fought in Syria are radical takfiri groups. You know them, you see them, they have put their videos out there and everywhere. And in case you don't know them, you can go and check them on Twitter and check what they call for and check how they speak to anyone who does not, who opposes them. Like if you oppose them, they just want to kill you. And they live in Europe and in the West. And they are considered dehumans and subhumans there in their societies. They are frustrated enough to just call on murder on social media. These are not the Syrians. So when you have a bunch of these and you listen to them and you report from them, you do not get the chance or the credibility to speak on behalf of all the Syrians. Hezbollah inside Syria protected its backbone, protected the minorities of Syria, protected the churches of Syria, protected the heritages of Syria, and it was also to protect Lebanon and to protect themselves and to protect their ways and this bond. Because, you know, this is what the Israelis and the Americans would love for us peoples. They would love for the Iraqis to be stranded alone on one side and the Syrians to be stranded alone on another and the Lebanese to be cut out alone, and they can divide and conquer us. And they did divide and conquer us. Well, to their bad luck that after fighting ISIS together since 2014 till date, the Iraqi, Syrian, Palestinian, Lebanese blood has been mixed in that fight. And we all know that ISIS did not come from our land. It was planted in the Pentagon. And it was breeded in the Pentagon and brought to where we have oil and gas. We know exactly who our enemy is and what they do. And this is why we are done with that lie about killing the Syrian people. The Syrian people that were killed in their Syrian civil war. They were beheaded by these groups and they were killed by the Syrian planes. Hezbollah does not have planes. The Hezbollah guerrilla fighting that happened was to clear out the zones, and you can check where they were. They fought in Ma'lula. You can go and ask the nuns of Ma'lula that they freed from kidnapping, whether they are grateful or not. Well, the nuns are Syrian. Do you not consider them Syrian because they are not aligned with you? Well, it doesn't work with me. You can go and ask the people of Mhardi, of Sqailbiyi. You can go and ask the people of Nubbul and Zahra and Kfaria and Fu'a and Dur'a, Busra, Sham, and Sayda Zainab. You can go and ask all these people in Syria who are actual Syrian people, who protected them and who killed them, who sent them, people from Shishan, people from Saudi Arabia, people from Tunis. They made it the world's land of jihad. They even had people come and brought up from UK and from France. They made up ISIS over the internet and they imported them into Syria to fight only where there's oil and gas. Hezbollah protected the Syrians. So, and just to be, to be on the safe side, I'd like, this is my piece of advice. I mean, we're in the last minutes of our talk. Always to be on the safe side. Whatever you see in the American mainstream media, question it.
Yeah, that's great advice. At the very least, question it. Ghadi, I want to ask you a couple more things before we wrap here. One, because I think it's important to touch on. There are a lot of media outlets that embedded with the Israeli military as they were invading villages in South Lebanon. That includes the BBC, The Economist, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post. I mean, all of them. I'm sure PBS did as well, though I could be
They are
mistaken
under
about
a traditional. They are under a traditional seat in history. They've always been there. It's where they belong. With the oppressor, with the colonizer, with the liar, with the genocidal army. This is where they were from the beginning of this war. At least now they are like honest enough to stand over there. Because reporting that, what do they call us? What do they call our children when they die?
human shields.
Young, young ladies, young men.
Oh, yeah. They're not children; they're adults.
Yeah,
Arab children are adults. Yeah.
But the IDF Golani rapist soldier that died inside his army military base, they told us his name and that he's a teenager and that he was. They humanized the baby killer and they dehumanize our babies. This is their media. This is what the Washington Post does. This is what they do it. So, I mean, I'd find it really bizarre if they were on the other side. Wouldn't you?
Well, they also have reporters in Lebanon, and I did see the Lebanese government actually say to them, like, stop embedding with invaders who are literally invading our country. But I appreciate that you mentioned that. And who you're referring to specifically is Hind Rajab, who was the 6-year-old that was killed with like hundreds of Israeli bullets. And then I think it was the BBC called her a young woman in their headline. She's a 6-year-old. Yet these genocidal soldiers that you're referring to of the settler army were called teens. They were just teens who were killed while they were in their cafeteria by a Lebanese drone. And the last thing I want to touch on here, Ghadi, it's a bit twofold, but one, I saw you on this outlet talking about why you stay in Lebanon, right? Because, a lot of people have left the country if they're able to, because it's, all the embassies are saying, get out while you can. But you choose to stay, and you gave a really eloquent and important reason why you choose to stay. And I'm curious if you can elaborate on that reason of why you stay. But also, I've had a lot of people reach out to me to ask me specifically if you're okay, because you're such an important and powerful voice. Yes. And they worry about the Israelis and their drones in the air and what they might do to you. So I guess, one, do you feel afraid personally because you're Ghadi, and Ghadi is an important person, and the Israelis are petty and vindictive in their murderers? And two, despite whatever fear you might have or whatever danger you might be in, why do you choose to stay?
First of all, it's my land. I am worthy of nothing if my land is not free. I go by a great saying for Anton Saad: if you are not free from a free land, so any freedom you get outside your motherland is just is dishonor in a way. This is a conviction that I have. What kind of life do I want? And I call all the time, all my life, for 18 years of journalism, I've been preaching for stuff that I'm supposed to actually practice now. When I say we are resistant and resilient, I need to practice that. It doesn't mean I will not go around. Like, my lifestyle includes working. I work in many places, and sometimes I have to travel for work. But my base is in Lebanon, my worth is in Lebanon. My fight and my struggle, and the reason I do all what I do is to maintain this land for myself and for the people who would come after me. I can't see myself in times of war not being here, trying to be in my society, trying to offer support or relief where I can, to be the voice of reason, especially where we have discussed the dangers internally. And I think we have a calling, and we have a duty to Lebanon, Rania. It's even you and me and our friend Noor and all of us people. We have a duty to be here and to speak up, not to let only two kinds of narratives be in the country. It's either Naim Qasim or Samir Jaja. It's either Iran or Israel. It's either America or Russia. No, we are the Lebanese people, and we have a say in it, and we are pro-fighting Israel, but we are not ideologically sectarian, and we are a great deal of the Lebanese people. So when we are empowered enough to have platforms to speak, it is our duty to stay and to speak. As for my own personal security, I mean, I don't think I'm that important to be attacked by a drone. Not that Israelis don't kill journalists. They do kill journalists. They do kill anyone. And yes, they might find anybody who's against them. Maybe at some point they might find them an easy target. We might become AI generated targets at some point because they killed everyone and anyone in Gaza. But I'm not afraid of that. I've always, in my years of war correspondence, I've always had this equation in my brain. In the beginning, in the most dangerous of my missions, and when people used to tell me, "Aren't you afraid?" And I used to answer, I was like 21, I used to answer, "I'm not more important than all the people who have already died." You know, Rania, I'm not more important than Isam Abdullah or Farah Omar or Rabia Ma'mari, the three journalists that were assassinated in Lebanon. I'm not more, and then later there is Sha'ban, and there are many, we don't even know the names. More than 170 journalists have been killed in the past year. So why shall I think that things would change if one more name would be added to that? It's not going to stop. They might kill us all, but there will be more people to talk about it. We're not going to leave our land. We're not going to let it stay to only two kinds of ideas and ideologies in the country. I tell you, sometimes I'm not afraid of the drones. I'm afraid of something else.
Hmm.
I'm really afraid at the social tension inside Lebanon. And sometimes I think the way the Zionists work is like by making problems, internal problems. And what I fear is that sometimes they would make targets to even spark more fights. So what really scares me is not me. What I'm scared of is even the people who are on the other spectrum in politics. I fear for their security because assassinating any political figure today in Lebanon would really shake up the stability. So I don't fear for myself. I fear for all the opposers because Israel has a history of assassinating people to make it look like someone else assassinated them. And do not disregard the fact that Rafiq Hariri was assassinated in Beirut in a very similar kind of attack. Today, as the satellites and the technology are being used in assassinations, we could see more and more the fingerprints of Israel in every attack on Beirut, whether it's the Beirut port blast or the assassination of Rafiq Hariri or the endless acts of terrorism that have been exercised on the Lebanese people and politicians since day one of the existence and the planting of this Zionist entity. So this is my fear. I'm afraid for the Lebanese security. I don't think of my own personal security. I don't think I'm dangerous. I mean, I speak, يعني. I mean, the Israelis obviously know, and if they really know, they know that I know no one in Hezbollah, and I'm not really liked by them, you know. I always tell my friends, because my mom and my neighbors, you know, and they're like, Ghadi, are you supposed to be a target? I'm telling them the good thing is that they infiltrated everything, they know everything, they know my baggage. I hate them, they hate me. We have fights all the time with their media, with their, you know. So, I mean, if they know their jobs well, they know that I'm not on a Hezbollah list in any chance. So I don't think there's a problem.
And then I just want to give you an opportunity before we close here, Ghadi. Can you remind everybody where they can follow your excellent commentary and journalism?
Well, for the time being, because I'm always like at the risk of losing my accounts, for the time being, I'm doing Instagram and Twitter. And I think if they stop these, we will always have a new platform, whether it's on YouTube or elsewhere. For now, it's Ghadi, Ghadi, and Francis, like the Pope. That's how I write my name, and this is
No
and this
relation,
is
though.
how I am.
No relation.
Well, no, I try to use it to get into the VIP places, you know, like in Italy and stuff. Like I'm a Francis, like the Pope.
Ghadi, I want to thank you so much for all of your excellent work and always coming on and breaking everything down for us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for giving me the time, and I just want to send the good vibes to everyone. Although we are in a lot of pain, the Lebanese people are writing down the new history of the Middle East and with it the world. So have some trust in us because we really trust our men and our drones and our rockets.
Ghadi, thank you so much.
Thank you.